Okay, we're going to continue again in the book of Isaiah and go through chapters 10 through 14. In verse 10, we'll start right into it. And anyway, this is kind of the woes from chapter 9 that it starts off that maybe should be in chapter 9. But it says, "Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees, to deprive the poor of their rights and withhold justice from the oppression of my people, making widows their prey and robbing the fatherless. What will you do on the day of reckoning when disaster comes from afar? To whom will you run for help? Where will you leave your riches? Nothing will remain but to cringe among the captives or fall among the slain. Yet for all this, his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised." So he's talking about people without justice there that are in there for the money. And Ephraim, the northern kingdom, had more reason to fear God than to fear Assyria. Yahweh would discipline Ephraim because of his pride, corrupted leadership, selfishness, and oppression of his vulnerable citizens. He would not suffer defeat because of military inferiority, but because of moral inadequacy. Assyria was simply an unsuspecting tool in Yahweh's hand that he would use to accomplish his purposes. It's in Habakkuk 1:12 through 17. This periscope is one of the greatest revelations of the relationship between heaven and earth in the Bible. So God used these people, and they're going to talk about it a little bit here. Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, in whose hand is the club of my wrath. So God used Assyria for his purpose, but they had a pride problem and they're going to pay a price, basically. Assyria was in for woe herself because she failed to acknowledge that she was under the sovereign authority of Yahweh. So she didn't win because she was great. She was won because Yahweh was holding her in his hand. I sinned against him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against the people who anger me, to seize loot and snatch plunder, and to trample them down like mud in the streets. But this is not what he intends. This is not what has in mind. His purpose is to destroy, to put an end to many nations. So he just thought this was part of his plan, and he was going to wipe them out and wipe out other nations. But God gave him instructions. Just trample them down and loot and snatch from them. She planned to pursue her own selfish purposes to destroy many nations in order to expand her own empire. She mistakenly thought that she was sovereign. She didn't recognize who really was sovereign. Are not my commanders all kings, he says? Has not Clino fared like Carchemish? It's not Hamath like Arpad, and Samaria like Damascus. As my hand sees the kingdom of the idols, kingdoms whose images excel those of Jerusalem and Samaria, shall I not deal with Jerusalem and her images as I dealt with Samaria and her idols? Syria, in her unrealistic pride, boasts in the person of her king that her princes were the equivalent of kings, so great their authority. She assumed that other cities of Judah were the same as the cities of other nations, namely without Yahweh's special concern and protection. She mistakenly thought that Judah's God was just another God, Therefore, she planned to go to Judah and Jerusalem just like she had done to other nations in their great cities. So they didn't listen to what God had to say to them, and they're just going to go through standard procedure. And when the Lord had finished all his work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart and the haughty look in his eyes. For he says, by the strength of my hand I have done this, and by my wisdom, because I have understanding, I removed the boundaries of nations. I plundered their treasures like a mighty one. I subdued their kings as one reaches into a nest. So my hand reaches for the wealth of all nations. As people gathered abandoned eggs, so I gathered all the countries, not one flapped a wing or opened its mouth to chirp. So he's very proud, and it's all about me, and he doesn't consider anything else. Assyria again personified and manifested arrogance and haughtiness by boasting that all her victories were the result of her strength and intelligence. She felt, as many nations have felt, including Nazi Germany, that she was superior and therefore had a right to determine the fate of inferiors. She had a right to steal from others who could not or would not defend themselves. Changing the boundaries of conquered nations was an integral part of the Assyrians' imperial practice, along with the relocation of captives. And that's what they do. They take half the people that were left over and take all the boys and move them to another country, and then they take the boys from the other country and move them in with the girls. And so he basically wanted to change their culture so they become dependent on him and not their own culture. Does the axe raise itself above the person who swings it, or the saw boast against the one who uses it? As if a rod were weld the person who lifted it up, or club brandishes the one who is not wood. This is illogical. The prophet pointed out for the impersonal instrument of judgment to exalt itself over the person who wields it. So that's what he's using this illogical illustration just to show that he's the one who's holding the axe, and now they're trying to tell him what they're going to do. Therefore, the Lord Almighty, will send a wasting disease upon his sturdy warriors. Under his prompt, a fire will be kindled like a blazing flame. Because of Assyria's pride, sovereign Yahweh of the armies would defeat this mighty foe. Isaiah described her fall as resulting from a wasting disease and consuming fire. So, she is pride, and God's going to see that she pays the price for her pride. Pride goeth before a fall. The light of Israel will become a fire, their Holy One a flame. In a single day it will burn and consume his thorns and briars. The splendor of his forests and the fertile fields it will be completely destroyed, as when a sick person wastes away, and the remaining trees of his forest will be so few that a child could write them down. Meaning, child can't count very high, so there's going to be a low number of trees. The Assyrians were jumping into the fire by invading Jerusalem. The fire would come from the light of Israel, namely her holy God. This fire would consume the small and the great in Assyria, from the lowly thorns to the beautiful garden plants to the mighty trees of the forests. And so that's going to happen where the invaders come in and basically destroy their big city there in Babylon. In that day, the remnant of Israel, the survivors of Jacob, will no longer rely on him who struck them down, but will truly rely on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. I guess that's Assyria. I was thinking of Babylon there. And so they were destroyed later on. And so they're going to rely, the ones that will no longer rely on him who struck them down, that's Assyria, but will truly rely on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. In some future day, the remnant who escaped annihilation by the Assyrians would no longer trust in man for deliverance, as Ahaz and Judah did before the Assyrian takeover. They would learn this most important lesson and truly trust in Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel. A remnant will return, a remnant of Jacob will return to the mighty God. Though your people will be like sand by the sea, Israel only a remnant will return. Destruction has been decreed, overwhelming righteousness. The Lord Almighty will carry out the destruction decreed upon the whole land. It will be a remnant of the whole house of Jacob from all the Israelites. The reference to the mighty God, along with the sincere change of the attitude of Israel, one that was not yet taken place, points to a time of fulfillment in the eschatological far distant future. That day, verse 20, as elsewhere, is the millennial reference here. So this is talking about far distant when they are preserved and move on to the millennial kingdom. Therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty says, my people who live in Zion, do not be afraid of the Syrians who beat you up with a rod and lift up a club against you as Egypt did. Very soon my anger against you will end and my wrath will be directed in their destruction. The Lord used reminders of two previous deliverance to encourage the residents of Jerusalem to believe that they would survive the attack of a stronger and larger foe. The Lord Almighty will lash them with a whip as when he struck down Midian at the rock of Orb, and he raised his staff over the waters as he did in Egypt. In that day their burden will be lifted from their shoulder, their yoke from their neck. The yoke will be broken because they have grown so fat. They enter Iath, and they pass through Migron. They store supplies at Michmash. They go over the pass and say, we will camp overnight in Geba. Ramah trembles, Gibrah of Saul flees. Cry out, daughter of Galem. Listen, Lachish, poor Anathnath, Madamim, in the flight of the people of Gibbeth take cover. This day will halt at Nob, and they will shake their fists at the mount of Zion and the hill of Jerusalem. See, the Lord Almighty will lop off the burls with great power, and the lofty trees will be felled, and the tall ones will be brought down. He will cut down the forest thickets with an axe, and Lebanon will fall before the mighty one. This prophecy found literal fulfillment when God himself defeated the Assyrians in 701 BC. We're going to talk about it in chapter 37 in a few weeks. Chapter 11. A shoot will come from the stump of Jesse, from his root a branch will bear fruit. And so this is a shoot. Usually they talk about from the stump of David, but now Isaiah gets a little bit more specific. It's from Jesse. And anyway, his branch will bear fruit. The figure of a branch, Hebrew sapling, refers to the Messiah, also appears in Jeremiah twice and in Zechariah twice. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. Clearly, this shoot would be a person and represents of God's Spirit would distinguish him. The future ruler would enjoy divine enablement and would manifest supreme godliness. This description presents him as perfectly endowed by the Spirit and everything he needs to fulfill his kingly tasks. And so I don't know if this is the first coming or the second coming. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decides by what he hears with his ears, but with the righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decision for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with a rod of his mouth, with the breath of his lips. He will slay the wicked. So he's going to be a just judge. The coming David would also delight in fearing the Lord. He would make decisions on the basis of reality rather than appearances, having the ability to see through the issues. Righteousness will be his belt and faithfulness the sash around his waist. A belt in Isaiah's culture held everything together else that the person wore. So the figure of a belt here pictures everything about the king as thoroughly righteous and pleasing to God. The wolf will live with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the goat, and the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and the little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play with the cobra's den, and the young child will put his hand in the viper's nest. So this is the Millennium Kingdom, definitely. Security and safety would result from this king's rule, whereas the conditions described may occur literally in the millennial kingdom. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountains, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So, the enemies of humankind, those who are hurtful and destructive, will no longer hurt or destroy people in God's holy mountain, because everyone will know they'll have a relationship with the Lord. In that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the people. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious. On that day points to the time when Messiah would rule, and then the Gentile nations would seek out the king who would represent his people, the Jews. The signal or standard in view refers to a rallying point. In that day, the Lord will reach out his hand for a second time to reclaim the surviving remnants of his people from Assyria to Lower Egypt, from Upper Egypt, from Cush, from Elam, from Babylon, from Hamath, and from the islands of the Mediterranean. Then there will be a second regathering of the Israelites to the promised land from all over the world. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth. The standard that the Messiah will lift up for the nations is the flag of his earthly kingdom. He will assemble under his banner a remnant of Jews from both the northern and the southern kingdoms. Ephraim's jealousy will vanish, and Judah's enemies will be destroyed. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and nor Judah hostile towards Ephraim. That's the northern and the southern kingdom. They will swoop down on the slopes of Philistia to the west. Together they will plunder the people to the east. They will subdue Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites will be subject to them. Internal strife among the tribes will cease. Instead of fighting among themselves, the Israelites will subdue their common enemies and gain the whole promised land. The Lord will dry up the gulf of the Egyptian Sea with a scorching wind. He will sweep his hand over the Euphrates River. He will break it into 7 streams so that anyone can cross over in sandals. There will be a highway for the remnant of his people that is left from Assyria, and there was for Egypt when they came up from Egypt. God will defeat Israel's enemies, Egypt and Babylon. His judgment on them will involve drying up major barriers, the Red Sea and the Euphrates River. Revelation 16:12. This judgment will allow the Jews to return to the promised land from the parts of the world unhindered. Chapter 12. In that day you will say, I will praise you, Lord. Although you were angry with me, your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me. Isaiah prophesied that on the day that Messiah reigned, the remnant who survived the harvesting of Israel would praise Yahweh for ending his discipline of them and for comforting them. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord himself is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. So it involves trust. And he talks about trust and salvation here. He's my strength. The focus of this song is God himself. Finally, the Israelites expressed their commitment to trust in him rather than other people. They acknowledge him as their salvation, their strength, and their song, not just as the provider of those blessings. Song is the natural expression of a free spirit. None of these things come apart from him. With joy, you will draw water from the wells of salvation. Water is a rich symbol of salvation, especially to a people who lived in a land as dry as Canaan. God had provided salvation in the form of water for the Israelites during the wilderness march. In the future, the Israelites could anticipate securing his salvation and sharing it with others, especially the Gentiles. Water represents everything necessary for supporting life. In that day you will say, give praise to the Lord, proclaim his name, make known among the nations what he has done, and proclaim his name is that his name is exalted. Sing to the Lord, for he has done precious, glorious things. Let this be known to all the world. In the eschatological day, the remnant of the Jews who will survive the tribulation and enter the millennium will give thanks to Yahweh, pray to him because of his character, reveal in his behavior, and tell Gentiles about his deeds. They will remind others from all over the world that he is an exalted person and will praise him in song for his excellent actions. Shout aloud, sing for joy, people of Zion, for great is the Holy One of Israel among you. Praise and joy come from realizing that Yahweh is salvation. Only Yahweh is the Holy One of Israel. Okay, that was the end of that. Chapters 13 through 35. This is a major section of the book that emphasizes the folly of trusting in nations rather than Yahweh. The section preceding it shows how King Ahaz trusted in Assyria and experienced destruction, and chapters 7 through 12. This section following it shows how King Hezekiah trusted in the Lord and experienced deliverance, chapter 36 through 39. In this presentation, the prophet explains his perspective from Israel to include the whole world. The God of Israel is also the Lord of the nations. This whole section of the book expands the idea that all kingdoms of the world will become kingdoms of God and his Christ Emmanuel. Daniel 2, verse 44. And so 13 through 35, a lot of it is just to show them that God is sovereign. He's the one you have to trust, and shows the consequences that they're going to face in the future. And I don't really like 13 through 35 that much. I might go through some of the chapters. I want to show you how, through going through 13 and 14, how I plan to just kind of give the comments without reading all the scripture, and I'll kind of choose chapters that we'll go through when we go through them. So chapter 13 through 35 primarily contains prophecy of divine judgments against various nations for their wickedness, including Babylon, Philistia, Moab, and others. It contrasts with the ultimate promise of future restoration and peace for God's people, with prophecies as interpreted as having been near and far future fulfillment, culminating in the ultimate judgment and the coming of the Messiah. A central theme is God is absolute power over the nations and heavens, encountering pagan beliefs and calling for trust in him alone, even in time of chaos. So we'll see how you like it, and let me know. But chapter 13 is a prophetic oracle or burden concerning the judgment and total destruction of Babylon. Though Babylon was not yet a dominant world power in Isaiah's 8th century BCE ministry, the prophecy confirms God's sovereignty over history, declaring the future downfall of the arrogant Babylon Empire long before it rises. So it became a huge empire, and I talked about a little bit there by mistake, but that's the one that was there that took over Israel and took them over to the Babylon area of the southern kingdom, and it was 586. But by then they had a huge city. But then they were destroyed when they went through the floodgates. So summons for destruction, 13:1 through 5. The chapter begins with Israel receiving a heavy, divine revealed message against Babylon. An army gathered by God, God issues a command to muster an army from distant lands, calling them his sacrificed ones and mighty ones, to execute his wrath against Babylon. And that's going to happen with the Medes and Persians. Signaled on a mountain, a banner is lifted on a high hill to gather warriors. The resulting commotion sounds like a vast, unruly crowd as the kingdom of nations come together for battle. Divine weapons of wrath, the invading forces are described as the Lord's weapon of indignation sent from faraway countries to destroy the whole land. The day of the Lord, and that's Isaiah 13:6 through 16. This section paints a terrifying picture of the coming day of the Lord, a theme used both for this historic event and for the ultimate final judgment. Terror and dread, the approach of this day causes widespread fear and anguish, people's hearts melt, and they writhe in pain like a woman in labor. Cosmic disturbances to emphasize the magnitude of judgment. Isaiah describes the cosmic signs, including the darkening of the sun, moon, and stars. And we know that happens at the end of the tribulation. Punishment of pride. God declares his intent to punish the world for its evil and wickedness, humbling the arrogance of the proud and ruthless. Scarcity of human life, so great is the slaughter that human life becomes more precious and rare than fine gold. Brutal violence. The prophecy foretells the horrific violence of war, where the infants are dashed to pieces, houses are looted, and wives are violated. Babylon's complete destruction, 17 through 22. The prophecy concludes with the explicit identification of the instrument of God's judgment and the permanent destruction of Babylon. The Medes summon. God declares he will stir up the Medes, a people who value killing over silver and gold. Historically, the Medes and the Persian under Cyrus capture Babylon. So this was a prediction once again that's going to come. This is about 730, and it's going to come in 586 or later, a little bit later than that. Overthrown like Sodom and Gomorrah, Babylon, once the magnificent jewel of kingdoms, will be completely overthrown by God because a desolate wasteland like the ancient destroyer cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we know the king had a huge pride problem when this happened. A permanent ruin, the city is fated to become inhabited again. Its once luxurious palaces will become a haunted place for wild animals, owls, and jackals. Isaiah 14 primarily contains a prophetic taunt song against the king of Babylon, celebrating his downfall and revealing God's ultimate sovereignty over oppressive empires. The chapter contrasts the pride and arrogance of earthly rulers that God's power to restore the oppressed. The restoration of Israel, verses 1 through 3. The chapter opens with a promise of mercy and restoration for the people of Israel. Divine compassion. The Lord will have compassion on Jacob and choose Israel, setting them in their own land after their time of exile. A reversal of fortunes. Foreigners will join themselves in Israel, and the people will rule over their former captives. After a long time of harsh bondage, Israel will finally rest from its suffering. A taunt filled against the king of Babylon. Taunt song against the king of Babylon, verses 4 through 23. The central part of the chapter is the mocking song directed at the now deceased king of Babylon. This powerful poem serves as a reminder of the futility of human pride. Relief for the earth. When the tyrant of Babylon is removed, the whole earth is finally at rest and breaks out in song. Even the trees of Lebanon, which the Lord had cut down for the king had cut down for his palaces, rejoice over his defeat. Descent into Sheol, the king of other nations who had already died, rise from their thrones in the underworld to greet Babylon king. They mock him for becoming as weak as they were, stripped of his earthly pomp and power. The fall of the morning star, taunted song, describe the king's ambitious ascent and subsequent fall from glory. He once boasted, "I will ascend to the heavens. I will Raise my throne above the stars. I will make myself like the Most High. This famous passage referred to the king as a morning star, or Lucifer, is often interpreted as describing the fall of Satan. I think it really is talking about the fall of the king of Babylon. And a lot of people say you want to read about Satan, go to Isaiah 14, and I think it's applicable to Satan, but it's really talking about the fall of the king of Babylon. A dishonorable grave, unlike other kings who receive an honorable burial, the king of Babylon is denied a proper tomb. He is cast out like a repulsive, trampled corpse, a fate he earned by destroying his own land and people. So it's kind of a big thing that you get a good burial for a king, and he didn't get it. Babylon's destruction, the song concludes with God's promise to wipe out the Babylonian dynasty completely. The Lord will turn Babylon into a desolate wasteland, sweeping it with the broom of destruction. So that's chapter 14 and a little bit more. Oh, yeah, we didn't quite get to the end there. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have cast down to the earth, you who were once laid low in the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens, I will praise my throne above the stars of God, I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. Zaphon was the most sacred mountain in Canaanite. I will ascend above the top clouds, I will make myself like the Most High, but you are brought down to the realm of the death, to the depths of the pit. So I just put that in so you could kind of see what was the actual scripture. Prophecies against Assyria and Philistia. The chapter ends with two smaller oracles that reinforce God's sovereign control over all nations. Assyria's defeat. The Lord declares his unchangeable purpose to break the power of Assyria with the land, removing its oppressive yoke from his people. Philistia's warning. The prophet warns Philistines are not to rejoice at the defeat of a past enemy, because an even greater threat, a flying fiery serpent, will arise to destroy them. The passage reaffirms that the Lord has established Zion as a refuge for his afflicted people. So that's the end of chapter 14. And all the forces of darkness cannot stop what God has ordained. And so that was the chapters, and I tried the two chapters the other way, and we'll see what I do next.